Hey everybody, this is our first little video on Excel and how to use it. We're going to do some real basic stuff, or I'm going to talk about some real basic stuff here. Stuff you may already know, but um, just in case you don't, or you're not as familiar with Excel, uh, we'll go over some of this. The first thing I want you to note is that this is a spreadsheet. It allows us to manipulate values and data. It's a great way for us to store, collect, and manipulate data. And that's what we'll be using it for. You'll be using it in lots of other classes. It allows you to be able to take that data and do some basic analysis with it. Things like make graphs and other stuff like that. It also allows us to do some really simplistic statistical analysis and calculations of some descriptive statistics such as means and those types of things, standard deviation and some of the other things that we'll be using. We'll be using this as a means to store our data, to organize our data, and also as a way to transfer the data that we've collected into the statistical package that we'll be using, Jamovi. Okay, so if we look at this up here across the top, we've got all the nice little drop-down menu things that we can click on. If you click on File up here, it gives us all the little functions that you can do under that drop-down menu. Pretty self-explanatory. We'll probably be doing most of our work under this drop-down menu of Home, where it has all these different various things you can do here, such as set what font you want, set the alignment, all those kinds of things. Now, under this one for font, it has all sorts of stuff you can do. Change which font style you want, what font size you want. You can do bold, italics, or underlined. You can color a cell. You can change the color of a letter. Okay, so if you color a cell, it changes the color of that cell. Let's see, there we go. Things like that. You can also put borders around each one of those cells if you want. Sometimes that makes it really nice when you're making a large table, so you can keep track going across and up and down as to where you are in that table. The other thing I want to point down is that point out is this little arrow down here in the corner of each one of these little top menus. If you click on one of those, it will bring up a new drop-down menu that has all sorts of additional functions that you can do. Similar to what you have there, alignment, borders, all those different things that you can do, but it gives you a little bit more some additional things that you can perform. If there's not one of these little pull down, drop down tabs there, that means that everything you can do within that little area is depicted in that top menu bar. Also down here at the bottom, if you look, you have this where it says Sheet 1, and then I have Sheet 2, and then this plus sign. The sheets are different pages, so you can have multiple sheets in an individual Excel file. So you can have one set of data here, and you can make another set of data on a separate sheet. If you want to add sheets, you just click this plus button, and it will add another sheet. If you want to get rid of that sheet, you can right-click on that sheet and delete it. Oops. To another data sheet. Okay. Now, let's get back to this idea of addresses. The main reason I want you to understand what the addresses are is because of the fact that this allows us to start referencing other cells in a given cell. And there are two types of references. One are referred to as an absolute reference, and the other is referred to as a relative reference or relative address. Excuse me, an absolute address or a relative address. The absolute address is basically this is what cell I want to reference. Okay, so if I wanted to reference always cell A1, I would use an absolute address for cell A1. And wherever I type that address, that reference in, it would always go back to cell A1. A relative reference is where the cell you want to reference is relative to the cell you're typing in. It sounds a little confusing, but let me give you an idea. Okay, so I'm going to type some numbers in here. Say 10, 11, 15, 95, just random numbers here. Okay. Now, if I want to do a relative reference and say, hey, I want whatever is in a certain cell to also appear in cell C, I can do that. I can do that by typing the equals sign first. Anytime you type the equals sign, this is either allowing you to reference another cell, or this indicates that you're going to be performing a function in this cell. And referencing another cell is a type of function. So you type an equals sign. It's automatically going to say, hey, this is telling me where to go or what to do in this particular cell. Okay. So if I want to reference cell A1, I can merely either type A1 in there after that equal sign, and you'll see it's kind of highlighted in blue. And when I hit a return button, it says 10. It is saying, hey, whatever cell I reference, it is going to put the value that's in that cell, okay, in the cell that I just typed it in. So cell C1 references cell A1. And when I click on it, you'll see that up here, right here, this shows me that what is actually in that cell is that you are referencing cell A1. What appears in the spreadsheet in cell C1 that's referencing cell A1 is the value that's in cell A1. Now this gets to be really nice in some ways because we can start using this to reference different cells. Okay. Now the other thing, the reason we call it a relative reference is if I want to copy this cell, okay, to other locations, what it's going to do is say wherever I copy that what's typed into here, it's going to say what I'm doing in this cell is I'm going over 2 columns and picking out that value. If I copy this to another location, so I'm going to Control C and copy it and click it down here to C2 and then Control V to paste it, it will do that same relative reference. So what it's saying here is, hey, in C1 you wanted to be go over 2 to A1. Okay. In this cell, it's going to say, hey, you copied that over here, so that means I need to go over to the left 2 columns and pick out the value in that cell. Okay. If I want to copy that down, I can just click in the bottom bottom right-hand corner of that cell till I move it until I get that little plus looking sign there, and I can drag this down, and each one of those cells will do a relative reference 2 columns over. Now, if I want to say, no, I don't want it to be a relative reference, I want it to be an absolute reference. In other words, I want it to say, hey, every single cell, you need to go back to exactly cell A1, not a relative, but an absolute reference. All you have to do is in front of that column value, put a $, and in front of that row value, put a $. Okay, and that is always going to be, let's change that to row 1. There we go. Okay, and that means that whatever's going to happen, it's going to say, hey, we're always going to reference that location, cell A1. It is not a relative reference. It is an absolute reference. Now, if I copy that down, you'll see that every single cell now in column C references cell A1. Okay, as opposed to if I use that relative reference, which is this, and copied it down, it would basically say, hey, this one is telling me that when I copy that information down, it's going to make it a relative reference. It's going to say, hey, you said move over 2 columns in that row. Here, when I copy it down to the next row, it's saying we're going to move over 2 columns in that same row. Okay? That's the difference between an absolute and relative reference. We'll stop here for right now. Hopefully it was a little helpful, but if you have questions, ask me.